The year is 1944. As the Allied forces prepared for the monumental D-Day landings, a different, quieter war was being fought deep within occupied France. It was a war of sabotage, communication, and organizing the local resistance. This was the dangerous domain of the OSS, the Office of Strategic Services, the direct precursor to the CIA. And their most audacious, and perhaps most unlikely, agent, was Major Peter J. Ortiz. Ortiz was not the typical spy. He was a multilingual, larger-than-life Marine Corps officer, known for his relentless intensity and his striking appearance. Crucially, Ortiz preferred to wear his full Marine uniform, complete with polished boots and his rank insignia, while operating miles behind enemy lines. This decision was not merely theatrical, it was a profound psychological weapon. It was a way to show the French resistance that American support was formal, official, and undeniable, providing them with a tangible symbol of Allied power. But it was also a suicidal level of risk, challenging the authority of every German officer he encountered with a boldness that most spies would never dare. He carried the weight of the OSS, the U.S. Marine Corps, and the future of the French resistance on his shoulders. To understand Peter Ortiz's unbelievable courage, we must look at his past. Born in New York in 1913, Ortiz had a privileged but restless youth. He was educated in France and Switzerland, becoming fluent in French, Spanish, German, and Italian, a skill set invaluable for future intelligence work. But Ortiz sought action, not diplomacy. In 1932, long before America entered the war, Ortiz joined the legendary French Foreign Legion. This was an act of profound self-discipline and pursuit of the most rigorous training available. Serving in the desolate and unforgiving deserts of North Africa, he endured the brutal, unforgiving regimen and the harsh combat of the Legion. Life in the Legion was designed to break the ordinary man and temper the soldier. He slept in the scorching sand, marched relentlessly under the North African sun, and learned advanced field craft, demolitions, and the art of operating autonomously. This period of intense hardship forged the foundation of his resilience, teaching him the critical art of operating effectively while completely isolated from civilization or support, a lesson that would prove vital for his later clandestine operations in Europe. When France fell to the Nazis in 1940, Ortiz was serving in the French cavalry. He was captured, escaped, and managed to flee to the United States. Driven by the shame of France's swift defeat and a searing desire to personally fight the Nazi occupation, he immediately joined the United States Marine Corps, seeking the toughest path back to the European front. His unique experience, linguistic skills, and combat record quickly brought him to the attention of the newly formed Office of Strategic Services, or OSS. He was the perfect, highly trained weapon for clandestine warfare. Ortiz's mission, codenamed Union 2, was fraught with danger before he even touched the ground. His team, consisting of fellow Marine Captain John D. Davis and OSS radio operator Master Sergeant Jack Risler, was tasked with parachuting into the Savoy, a rugged, mountainous region of southeastern France, known for its strong Maquis presence but also for being a hotbed of Gestapo activity. The complexities of the jump were terrifying, parachuting at night, into heavy fog, aiming for a small, poorly marked drop zone high in the French Alps. The transport aircraft, an unarmed B-17, had to fly at low altitudes to avoid radar, yet high enough to give the agents time for parachute deployment. German night fighters were a constant menace. Furthermore, Luftwaffe fighters frequently patrolled the routes of Allied supply planes, turning every trip into a gamble of life and death. The French resistance fighters on the ground had only minutes to set up signal fires, guide the plane, and recover the agents and the supply containers before the noise of the aircraft attracted German patrols. Missing the drop zone meant a brutal, fatal fall into the treacherous ravines or immediate capture by German intercept forces. Despite the risks, they landed successfully and were met by the Maquis leaders they were meant to support. Their objective was clear: organize, arm, and train the scattered resistance groups, the Maquis, to prepare them for coordinated sabotage against the German supply lines that flowed through the French Alps. Ortiz was tasked with unifying desperate, disorganized bands of patriots into a cohesive fighting force, providing them with training in the use of explosives, American small arms, and advanced radio procedures, preparing them for the imminent invasion. Life in the field was one of constant deprivation. Ortiz and his men lived in makeshift shelters, often sleeping in cold barns or caves, depending entirely on the benevolence and courage of local farmers for food and intelligence. Hunger was common, and the cold in the mountains was relentless. But the deepest danger was betrayal. The Gestapo had infiltrated informants into many resistance networks, and one wrong word or an unfamiliar face could mean a German raid in a matter of hours. In this environment of paranoia and mortal danger, Ortiz made his radical tactical choice: he insisted on wearing his full Marine Corps uniform. To the French, this uniform was a beacon of hope and legitimacy. It was the first time in years they had seen an official Allied authority challenging the Nazis on their own soil. The first Navy Cross he earned came on a hot August day in 1944. Ortiz and his team, while scouting, encountered a heavily armed German patrol. A fierce firefight erupted. The Americans were completely outnumbered, but Ortiz's sudden, uniformed appearance seemed to shock the German soldiers, causing a critical moment of hesitation. They were not expecting to encounter a fully kit Marine major in the heart of occupied France, a man they had orders to hunt, but whose rank commanded a grudging military respect. Displaying incredible tactical acumen and ignoring intense enemy fire, Ortiz directed his small team, laying down suppressing fire until the Maquis fighters could retreat and regroup. Ortiz, standing tall in his uniform, deliberately drew the German fire toward himself, sacrificing cover to ensure his comrades' escape. His actions under fire ensured the safety of his team and the integrity of the resistance cell. The story of the 2,000 mines is intrinsically linked to the mission's high-risk logistics. This phase required continuous, dangerous operations to secure vital supply lines. One of the most perilous tasks was the constant need to remove enemy landmines to secure landing zones for Allied planes that brought in supplies, weapons, and more OSS agents. These makeshift airfields were often cleared in open farmland or mountain valleys, requiring speed and absolute silence to avoid detection. Ortiz was a specialist in demolitions, but even he could not always wait for the proper tools. Facing intense time pressure, often under the direct observation of German forces patrolling nearby roads, Ortiz would lead teams into minefields. Legendary accounts state he would, at times, enter the fields alone, clearing them with his bare hands, relying only on his knowledge of German ordnance and a fearless calm, to ensure a safe landing area. His skill and speed were legendary. He could locate, disarm, and extract mines with incredible efficiency, repeatedly risking his life to preserve the vital supply chain of the resistance. He was also the demolition expert behind dozens of high-value sabotage missions. The OSS strategy was simple: paralyze the German response. Ortiz's team successfully blew up key railway lines, vital communication hubs, and crucial bridges across the Alpine region. This effective throttling of German logistics prevented hundreds of thousands of troops and supplies from reaching the major battlefronts. He was the vital link between the Allied strategy and the local French fury, transforming scattered groups of patriots into a disciplined fighting force ready for the invasion. Ortiz's Second Navy Cross was awarded for an act of pure sacrificial leadership that occurred shortly after the successful D-Day landings. By mid-August 1944, the Germans were in a chaotic retreat, but their last acts were often the most brutal. On August 16, 1944, Ortiz and his small American team, accompanied by several Maquis leaders, were cornered in the small, defenseless village of Centron, in the French Alps. A much larger German force, estimated to be over 200 soldiers, led by a ruthless colonel, surrounded them. The German colonel delivered a chilling ultimatum: surrender the Americans, or every civilian in the village, men, women, and children, would be immediately executed. The tension was agonizing. Ortiz and his men had enough ammunition for a final, suicidal stand, but the result would have been the immediate massacre of every civilian in Centron. Ortiz knew they were outmatched, but he also recognized the immediate and terrifying danger to the civilians. He faced the grim calculus of war: 3 American lives versus the survival of an entire village and the backbone of the local resistance leadership. In a move of staggering courage, Ortiz stepped forward, still wearing his full uniform, and offered a deal: he would surrender himself and his 2 American comrades, provided the German colonel immediately released all the French resistance fighters they had captured and spared the lives of the villagers. He essentially traded his freedom, and the freedom of his men, for the survival of the French citizens and the core leadership of the Maquis. The German colonel, perhaps impressed by Ortiz's brazenness and high rank, or seeking a high-value capture to present to his superiors, agreed. Ortiz became a prisoner of war, POW. Ortiz's imprisonment was rigorous, but his high profile and status as a decorated Marine officer in full uniform gave him a strange protection. He was subjected to harsh interrogations by the Gestapo, who were infuriated by his uniformed defiance behind their lines. Nevertheless, he maintained silence and protected the identities of the Maquis, repeatedly sacrificing his own well-being to protect the mission. He was moved through various prison camps, eventually ending up at the infamous Oflog 64 in Poland, a remote camp specifically designated for captured Allied officers. Life in Oflog 64 was defined by biting cold, constant hunger, and the psychological warfare of captivity. The Polish winter was brutal, and food was scarce. The morale of the prisoners depended on leaders like Ortiz. Despite the bleak conditions, Ortiz continued his resistance. He became a leader among the prisoners, maintaining morale, teaching demolition skills, and repeatedly attempting to escape, using his training to find weaknesses in the perimeter. The climax of his ordeal came in January 1945, as the Soviet Red Army advanced into Poland. The Germans, determined not to let high-value prisoners fall into Soviet hands, forced the prisoners to begin the dreaded Death March. In sub-freezing weather, with little food and no shelter, thousands of Allied officers were forced to march hundreds of miles west. Ortiz was finally liberated by Soviet forces amidst the chaos of the Eastern Front. Even then, his mission was not over. He immediately took command of groups of escaped American prisoners, organizing their movement and assisting them in reaching Allied lines across the chaotic front. His last act of service was ensuring the survival of his fellow Americans until they were safely in Allied hands. He returned to the United States a living legend, one of only 2 Marines to receive the Navy Cross twice during the war. Peter J. Ortiz was the embodiment of audacious leadership. He was the spy who refused to hide, trading the secrecy of espionage for the morale-boosting presence of a warrior. His actions not only trained the French resistance but also provided undeniable proof to the French people that America was invested in their freedom. His willingness to confront danger openly, whether clearing minefields with his hands, engaging German patrols in uniform, or negotiating his own surrender to save hundreds of civilian lives, makes his story one of the most compelling and least told sagas of the Second World War. Ortiz's dual Navy crosses stand as a testament to courage driven by defiance and sacrifice. He set the standard for the modern American Special Operations agent, proving that sometimes, the greatest act of sabotage is simply showing up in full uniform where you are least expected, forcing the enemy to acknowledge the fight. His legacy is one of the most extraordinary examples of individual impact on the entire European theater, a chapter of espionage and honor that will never be forgotten.